I'm Mackenzie Wilson, 27, and last Tuesday my world collapsed when I discovered my own father created a social media poll asking if I should be erased from our family. The father who taught me to ride a bike, who I thought hung the moon. His exact words: "If you could erase one person from the family, should it be her?" My stomach lurched as I read comments from relatives and his friends. My hands trembled as screenshots revealed his disappointment in my artistic career and lifestyle choices. Nothing prepares you for your parent publicly wishing you away. Before I continue this story that turned my world upside down, where are you watching from? Like and subscribe if family betrayal hits close to home, and join me through this painful journey of confrontation and healing. Growing up in suburban Philadelphia, I had what most would consider a comfortable childhood. Our two-story colonial with the well-manicured lawn was the picture of middle-class success. My mom Rachel taught 4th grade at the local elementary school, while my dad Thomas climbed the corporate ladder at a marketing firm, eventually becoming a senior executive before I finished high school. Weekends meant family bike rides along the Schuylkill River Trail, or museum trips, where Dad patiently waited as I spent hours in the art galleries. Summer vacations to the Jersey Shore created a photo album full of sandcastle competitions and ice cream-stained smiles. From the outside looking in, we were the portrait of familial bliss. Dad was always ambitious, detail-oriented, and expected excellence. When I brought home an A-, his first question was always about the missed points rather than celebrating what I'd achieved. "I'm only pushing you because I know your potential," he'd say, a phrase that became the backdrop of my childhood. At the time, I interpreted this as love and investment in my future. Art became my passion early on. My earliest memories involve crayons and construction paper spread across the living room floor. By 8, I was sketching portraits that actually resembled their subjects. Mom would proudly display them on the refrigerator, while Dad would nod and say, "That's nice, Kenzie, but don't neglect your math homework." My talent developed throughout middle and high school, with several teachers suggesting art school. Mom supported this path enthusiastically, but Dad's reaction was more measured. "Art is a wonderful hobby," he'd say, emphasizing the word hobby, "but you need something practical to fall back on." The first real conflict erupted during my junior year when college applications loomed. Over dinner one night, I announced my intention to apply to art schools. "Absolutely not," Dad said, setting down his fork with an uncharacteristic force. "Business school is the sensible choice. You can minor in art if you must." For weeks, tension filled our home. Mom tried mediating, suggesting compromise after compromise. Finally, Dad agreed to art school applications with conditions. I would double major in something practical and maintain a part-time job to understand the value of money in the real world. It was around this time that the comparisons with my younger brother Dylan began. 4 years my junior, Dylan showed early aptitude for numbers and strategic thinking. Dad would beam as Dylan explained stock market fluctuations he'd researched for a school project, while my latest portfolio achievement might receive a distracted "that's nice." "Your brother understands how the world works," Dad would say. "You could learn something from him." These comments seemed harmless then, just a father proud of his son's achievements. I didn't recognize them as the foundation for a pattern that would define our family dynamics for years to come. When acceptance letters arrived, including one from my dream school in New York, Dad's response was tepid. "It's your life," he said with a sigh. "Just don't come asking for bailouts when you're waiting tables with an art degree." Mom celebrated with a special dinner, but Dad's reluctance cast a shadow over my achievement, a shadow I was already becoming accustomed to living within. Moving to New York for art school felt like stepping into the life I was meant to live. The city pulsed with creative energy that matched my own internal rhythm. My roommate Jasmine introduced me to underground art shows and galleries hidden in converted warehouses. For the first time, I was surrounded by people who didn't question why I wanted to create, they just understood. During my freshman year, phone calls home maintained a weekly schedule. Mom asked about classes and friends, while Dad inevitably steered conversations toward finances. How's that part-time job hunt going? Or make sure you're keeping track of expenses. Never, how's your artwork developing? Or are you enjoying your classes? When I made the dean's list that first semester, Mom sent a care package filled with homemade cookies and art supplies. Dad's contribution was a book titled, Supplementing Creative Careers, Financial Planning for Unstable Income. The gesture perfectly encapsulated his approach to my chosen path. Returning home for Thanksgiving break my sophomore year, I brought a portfolio of work that had earned praise from my professors. I laid out the pieces on the dining room table, eager to share my progress. Mom examined each one, asking questions about techniques and inspiration. Dad glanced at them while passing through to the kitchen. Interesting, he said, the word hanging empty in the air. Later, he spent 4 to 5 minutes discussing Dylan's high school business club project. By junior year, visits home decreased in frequency. Each return to Philadelphia felt like stepping back into a role that no longer fit. I'd changed, expanding beyond the confines of my father's expectations, but in his eyes, this growth registered as deviation rather than development. The summer before senior year, I secured a prestigious internship at a boutique design studio in Manhattan. When I called with the news, Dad's response was, "Is it paid?" Unpaid internships are exploitation, you know. It's a foot in the door, I replied, trying to mask my disappointment at his reaction. Doors to what, exactly? A lifetime of scrambling for freelance work. Dylan just got accepted into the business program at Penn, you know. Full scholarship. The comparison stung, as it was meant to. Dylan had followed the path laid out by our father without question. His compliance was rewarded with unlimited approval, while my divergence was treated as personal betrayal. Graduation arrived with honors, my thesis project receiving department recognition. My parents attended the ceremony, Mom beaming with pride, Dad checking his watch throughout the proceedings. At dinner afterward, he asked, "So what's the plan now? Moving back home while you figure things out?" The question carried an assumption of failure that infuriated me, but I maintained composure. Actually, I've lined up some interviews at design firms here in the city. New York rent will eat you alive, he warned. Don't expect us to supplement your lifestyle choice. Despite my determination to prove him wrong, the job market proved challenging. After 3 months of interviews that led nowhere, I reluctantly packed my belongings and moved back to my childhood bedroom, a defeat in Dad's narrative. The next 6 months became an exercise in endurance. Each morning, I applied for jobs while Dad made comments like, "Dylan's already being groomed for management, and he's still in college." Every rejection email deepened my sense of failure, amplified by Dad's not-so-subtle suggestions about business school applications, or realistic career paths. Thanksgiving that year became the breaking point. Extended family gathered around our dining table, and Dad seized the opportunity for a public evaluation of my choices. "Mackenzie is still figuring things out," he announced, passing the cranberry sauce. Meanwhile, her brother is thriving in business school. Some people just take longer to find practical direction. The table fell silent. My face burned as relatives offered pitying glances, or awkward changes of subject. That night, I applied for every design position within commuting distance of Boston, far enough from Philadelphia to breathe, close enough to visit on occasion. When an entry-level graphic design position at a small marketing agency offered an interview, I borrowed money from my mother for the bus ticket, not telling Dad until the offer letter arrived. Boston, he questioned, his disapproval evident. What's in Boston besides overpriced apartments and traffic? A job, I answered simply. In my field. He shook his head. I give it 6 months before reality sets in. 2 weeks later, I moved to Boston with 2 suitcases and a determination to prove him wrong, even as a small voice inside wondered if he might be right. My Boston apartment could generously be described as cozy. In reality, it was a 400-square-foot studio in Austin with a kitchenette barely large enough to prepare ramen noodles. The rent consumed nearly half my entry-level salary, but it was mine. No disapproving glances, no comparative comments about Dylan's achievements, just walls that contained only my own expectations. Reality at Pixel Perfect marketing didn't match the creative freedom I'd imagined during 4 years of art school. My days consisted of resizing banner ads, tweaking corporate logos within strict brand guidelines, and designing email templates that the account managers would inevitably ask to make the logo bigger on. Creativity existed within narrow parameters defined by client whims and marketing directors who used phrases like "make it pop" without further direction. Despite the constraints, I threw myself into every assignment. Staying late to perfect projects became routine, even when my efforts received minimal recognition. My direct supervisor Brenda appreciated my dedication, but the creative director barely acknowledged junior designers unless mistakes were made. Boston itself became my canvas outside work hours. I explored neighborhoods from the North End to Jamaica Plain, sketching urban landscapes in a moleskin notebook and absorbing the city's energy. During one of these weekend explorations at a coffee shop in Cambridge, I met Amber, a children's book editor with a sardonic sense of humor and unflinching honesty. We bonded over creative frustrations and shared apartment horror stories. She quickly became my lifeline in the city. Calls home dwindled from weekly to bi-weekly, then monthly. Mom noticed, calling occasionally with gentle inquiries about my absence. Dad rarely came to the phone during these calls, but when he did, his questions followed predictable patterns. How's the job? Making enough to cover expenses. It's fine. I'm managing. Just managing. Dylan's already been offered a summer internship at Goldman. Paid, of course. These conversations left me emotionally drained, so I began texting Mom instead, sharing selective highlights while omitting struggles that would only ammunition for Dad's disapproval arsenal. 6 months into my Boston life, Pixel Perfect landed a major client, a startup fitness app seeking complete brand identity development. During the all-hands meeting, the creative director announced, "We need fresh perspectives on this one. Mackenzie, you've shown promise with the social media templates. I want you on the concept team." This opportunity became my obsession. Evenings and weekends disappeared into research and sketches. My apartment walls transformed into a vision board of concepts and inspirations. When presentation day arrived, I'd prepared comprehensive mock-ups for everything from the app interface to marketing materials. The client loved my concepts. "This is exactly what we envisioned but couldn't articulate," the founder said, pointing to my color scheme and typography choices. 2 weeks later, Brenda called me into her office. "Your work on the fitness app impressed everyone," she said. "We're promoting you to junior art director with a team of your own." That night, I called home with the news, hoping finally to hear pride in my father's voice. Mom answered, her excitement genuine. "Oh honey, that's wonderful. Thomas, pick up the phone, Mackenzie has news." I heard the click of the extension. "What's up, Kenzie?" Dad asked, sounding distracted. "I got promoted to junior art director," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "With a raise and my own team." A brief pause followed. That's nice. Is it enough to start putting money into retirement? You're already behind where you should be at your age. The air left my lungs. Mom jumped in. Thomas, this is wonderful news. We're proud of you, Mackenzie. Of course, he added perfunctorily. Good job. Listen, I need to run. Dylan's calling on the other line. He just aced his finance exam. Christmas that year marked my first visit home in months. Walking into my parents' house felt like entering a museum dedicated to Dylan's accomplishments. New photos of him in business attire at networking events adorned the mantel, while my art school graduation photo had migrated from the living room to the upstairs hallway. Dinner conversation centered around my cousin Jennifer's success at a consulting firm and Dylan's impressive GPA. When Mom finally asked about my promotion, Dad interjected, "Speaking of careers, did you hear Jennifer made 6 figures her first year out of college? Now that's applying yourself." The final blow came when Dylan announced his engagement to Melissa, his college girlfriend. Dad immediately proposed a toast, declaring, "To Dylan and Melissa, making responsible life choices and building a solid foundation for success." His eyes flickered briefly toward me, the implication clear, unlike some people at this table. I returned to Boston feeling more distant from my family than ever. My calls home became increasingly rare, holidays were approached with dread, and Boston, specifically the friend group centered around Amber, became my emotional safe harbor. Though I never explicitly cut ties with my family, the threads connecting us grew increasingly thin, stretched between my need for acceptance and their inability, particularly my father's, to accept the path I'd chosen. Tuesday evenings typically meant takeout Thai food and mindless social media scrolling, a small luxury after long design sessions. That particular Tuesday began no differently. Spring rain tapped against my apartment windows as I settled onto my second-hand couch, balancing a container of pad thai on my lap while thumbing through my phone. A notification appeared, unusually high activity on my father's profile. Dad rarely posted anything beyond obligatory holiday greetings and occasional golf course photos. Curious, I tapped the notification. The post appeared with a timestamp of 3 hours earlier. If you could erase one person from the family, should it be her? Getting tired of the constant disappointment and attitude? Vote in the comments. My chopsticks clattered to the floor. Surely this wasn't about me. Dad had cousins he complained about, a sister-in-law he found difficult. But as I scrolled through the comments, reality crashed down like a physical weight. "Is this about who I think it is?" asked my Aunt Carol. Dad's reply, "Who else? The so-called artist who thinks she's too good for family gatherings, but not too proud to cash birthday checks." My mother's brother chimed in, "Every family has one who takes more than they give." Dad again, "Exactly. 27 years of investment with zero return. At least Dylan understands family loyalty and responsibility." Comments piled up, relatives speculating, family friends offering sympathy for my father's difficult situation, a few token defenses quickly dismissed by Dad's further elaborations on my failures. Each word sliced deeper than the last. Always been self-centered, even as a child. Threw away every opportunity. Deliberately chose a path that would disappoint us. Ungrateful for all we've sacrificed. My vision blurred, breaths coming in shallow gasps. The phone slipped from my trembling hands. A crushing pressure squeezed my chest as I struggled to inhale. Panic consumed me, thoughts spiraling into darkness. My own father wishes I didn't exist. My family agrees. They've discussed this before. They'd be happier without me. Through the fog of panic, I somehow managed to call Amber. Her voice anchored me momentarily to reality. "Kenz. What's wrong? You sound terrible." Words tumbled out between gasping sobs. I couldn't form complete sentences, just fragmented phrases. My dad, social media, wants to erase me, everyone agrees. I'm coming over. Don't do anything. Just breathe. I'll be there in 15 minutes. While waiting, a terrible clarity cut through the emotional storm. I needed evidence before my father realized his mistake and deleted everything. With shaking hands, I took screenshots, the original post, every damning comment, every cruel reply. As I captured the final images, notifications began disappearing. Dad was deleting the thread, but too late. The digital record of his betrayal was preserved. Amber arrived with emergency supplies, ice cream, whiskey, and fierce protective anger. She scrolled through the screenshots, her expression darkening with each swipe. This is abuse, Mackenzie. Pure psychological abuse. I shook my head, decades of conditioning surfacing automatically. He's just disappointed in me. I didn't follow his plan. Stop defending him, Amber cut in. No parent should ever publicly discuss erasing their child. That's not disappointment. That's emotional warfare. The next 3 days passed in a blur of tissues and sleeping pills. I called in sick to work, unable to function beyond basic survival. Amber brought food I couldn't eat, and sat with me through crying jags that left me hollow. Between bouts of devastating sadness came waves of incandescent rage. How dare he reduce my existence to a social media poll? On the third day, Amber discovered something that intensified the betrayal. Both my mother and brother had seen the post. Mom had sent a private message asking Dad to take it down, but hadn't defended me publicly. Dylan had merely reacted with a sad face emoji, no comment, no defense, no private outrage on my behalf. My entire family had witnessed my public humiliation. None had stood firmly in my corner. That realization transformed something fundamental in my understanding of family. The people genetically programmed to protect me had instead formed a silent consensus. Mackenzie was the family disappointment, the acceptable target, the expendable one. As this truth settled into my bones, a strange calm replaced the emotional chaos. With clarity born from absolute betrayal, I knew what needed to happen next. After 3 days of silence, my phone displayed missed calls from both parents and several text messages expressing concern about my disappearance. Not concern for my feelings or well-being after the post, concern that I wasn't responding to them. The distinction was telling. Before confronting my family, I scheduled an emergency session with Dr. Lindsay, the therapist I'd been seeing sporadically since moving to Boston. Initially, therapy had focused on work-related stress and imposter syndrome. Now we faced something far more fundamental. I need strategies, I told her, voice steadier than I expected. I'm calling my father today. Dr. Lindsay leaned forward. What's your goal for this conversation, Mackenzie? The question gave me pause. What did I want? Apologies wouldn't erase the screenshots burned into my memory. Explanations couldn't justify public humiliation. I want him to acknowledge what he did. No excuses, no deflection. Just once, I need him to take responsibility. She nodded. That's a clear goal. Let's discuss boundary-setting language and de-escalation techniques. For an hour, we rehearsed scenarios. Dr. Lindsay playing my father's likely responses, while I practiced maintaining emotional boundaries. We created a physical signal, touching my collarbone, to remind myself to breathe when triggered. Most importantly, she emphasized my right to end the conversation if it became destructive. That evening, sitting cross-legged on my bed with Amber on standby in the living room, I called home. Dad answered on the second ring. Finally. Your mother's been worried sick. Would it kill you to return a phone call? His accusatory tone immediately activated my defenses, but I touched my collarbone and breathed. I saw your social media post about erasing me from the family, I said, my voice deliberately measured. I needed time to process before speaking with you. Silence stretched for 3 seconds before he responded, his tone shifting to dismissive. That? You're overreacting. It was just letting off steam after you missed Dylan's engagement dinner. You publicly asked if I should be erased from the family. You confirmed it was about me in the comments. You called me a disappointment and said I gave nothing back to the family. You're being too sensitive, he deflected. It was a momentary frustration, not a congressional declaration. Besides, if you called more often or visited for important family events. Stop. My voice sharpened. This isn't about missed phone calls. You publicly humiliated me and invited others to join in. That was a choice you made. In the background, I heard Mom ask what was happening. Dad covered the receiver partially, their muffled exchange ending with Mom taking the phone. Mackenzie, honey, your father didn't mean it like that. He was just having a bad day, Anne. Did you see the post, Mom? Her hesitation answered before her words. Yes. I asked him to take it down. But you didn't defend me. You didn't tell him it was wrong. You didn't call to check if I was okay after seeing my parent ask if I should be erased from existence. Sweetheart, you know how your father gets when he's upset. I was trying to de-escalate. By sacrificing me. Again. The bitter truth escaped before I could soften it. Dad's voice returned, louder now. Don't talk to your mother that way. This victim routine is exactly why that post resonated with so many people. You've been difficult since art school, choosing a path guaranteed to create hardship, then blaming us for not celebrating your struggles. Is that what you think this is about? My career choice? It's about attitude. Your brother makes time for family despite a demanding schedule. He respects our values. He contributes meaningfully to conversations, instead of sitting in judgment with your artistic superiority. Each word revealed the depth of his resentment. This wasn't about missed dinners or career choices. It was about my fundamental rejection of his life blueprint. I need to ask you something, I said, struggling to maintain composure. Did you mean what you wrote? Do you wish you could erase me from the family? The silence lasted too long before he answered. When you chose to pursue art against my advice, I told you actions have consequences. You've made it clear your priorities lie elsewhere. So yes, sometimes I think the family would function more harmoniously without the constant disappointment you represent. The truth, finally exposed, hit with physical force. I heard Mom gasp in the background, then Dylan's voice joining the fray. He must have been there all along. Dad, that's going too far, my brother interjected, his first defense of me coming years too late. Stay out of this, Dad snapped. Mackenzie needs to hear the truth for once instead of being coddled. My chest constricted, but alongside the pain rose a strange sense of liberation. The pretense was gone. The relationship I'd been fighting to preserve had never truly existed. Thank you for your honesty, I said, surprising myself with the steadiness in my voice. I won't burden your family harmony any longer. I ended the call and blocked their numbers in a single motion. Then I turned off my phone completely, hands shaking violently as delayed adrenaline flooded my system. Amber found me curled on the bedroom floor, gasping through tears. She didn't offer platitudes or false comfort, just sat beside me, one hand on my back, bearing witness to the collapse of my family foundation. The following weeks passed in a fog of functional depression. I performed required tasks at work with robotic efficiency, but initiated no conversations. Amber and our small friend circle created a protective buffer, ensuring I ate and occasionally left the apartment. Dr. Lindsay increased our sessions to twice weekly, helping me navigate the acute grief of family estrangement. Work performance inevitably suffered. Projects returned with unprecedented revision requests. My team noticed my emotional absence, creativity replaced by technical adequacy. After a particularly difficult client meeting where I couldn't summon enthusiasm for the presentation, Brenda pulled me aside. "Whatever's happening in your personal life is affecting your work, Mackenzie. Take some time. Get it sorted. Your position will be here when you return." The company's mental health leave policy provided 6 weeks at partial pay, a financial strain, but a psychological necessity. With Amber's encouragement, I filed the paperwork the next day, disconnecting completely from professional demands to focus on the monumental task of rebuilding my sense of self independent from family definition. The first week of leave passed in a blur of sleep and mindless television. Grief manifested physically: muscle aches, persistent headaches, complete loss of appetite. Amber practically force-fed me smoothies, her concern evident but never smothering. During our sessions, Dr. Lindsay suggested a therapeutic journal. "Write without censoring," she instructed. "This isn't for publication, or even sharing. It's for excavating buried truths." Initial entries were chaotic, rage-filled rants punctuated by tear stains and incomplete sentences. Gradually, patterns emerged from the emotional chaos. I documented memories previously minimized, Dad describing my childhood art as nice little drawings, while praising Dylan's math tests as extraordinary achievements. Mom consistently choosing peace over protection when Dad's criticism crossed into cruelty. The subtle conditioning that taught me my worth depended on compliance with my father's vision. "You're identifying emotional abuse patterns," Dr. Lindsay noted during our 4th week. "This recognition is crucial for breaking the cycle." "It wasn't all bad," I protested weakly. "There were good times too." Of course there were. Abusive relationships are rarely consistently negative. The intermittent positive reinforcement actually strengthens the trauma bond. Her words challenged my remaining denial. If I labeled my father's behavior as abusive, my entire childhood narrative required re-examination. The enormity of this task felt overwhelming. Amber suggested reconnecting with college friends who had witnessed my family dynamics firsthand. "You need external validation that this isn't all in your head." My former roommate Jasmine responded immediately to my tentative text. Over video chat, I hesitantly described the social media incident, expecting shock. Instead, she nodded grimly. "I'm not surprised, Kenz. Remember Parents' Weekend sophomore year? Your dad spent the entire dinner interrogating you about employment statistics for art majors while completely ignoring that incredible installation piece that won the department award." Other college friends shared similar observations. My painting professor had once pulled me aside after Dad's particularly cutting remarks during a student showcase. "Some parents struggle to separate their children's choices from their own identity," she'd said. "It's their limitation, not yours." These external perspectives confirmed what I'd begun to suspect. My family dynamics had never been normal or healthy, just familiar enough to seem inevitable. Online, I discovered communities of adult children estranged from parents. Their stories echoed mine with eerie similarity: the conditional love, impossible standards, golden child, the scapegoat dynamics. For the first time, I felt truly understood rather than defective for failing to maintain family harmony at any cost. As emotional clarity increased, so did my creative energy. I purchased new canvases and paints, setting up a small studio space in my apartment's corner. Unlike my commercial design work, these paintings emerged without filters or client considerations, raw expressions of grief, rage, and gradual healing. Thanksgiving approached, the first major holiday since the estrangement. Amber preemptively invited me to her parents' home in Somerville. "Fair warning," she said. "They'll adopt you immediately and feed you until you explode." She wasn't exaggerating. The Goldsteins welcomed me with genuine warmth, asking about my work with actual interest, and sharing family stories that involved healthy disagreements resolved through communication rather than control. By evening's end, Amber's mother pressed leftovers into my hands and extracted a promise to join them for Hanukkah. "Family is who treats you like family," Amber said as we rode the tea back to our neighborhood. The simple truth of this statement settled into my consciousness, challenging decades of conditioning about blood obligations. December brought unexpected opportunity, when a local cafe known for featuring emerging artists contacted me about the personal paintings I'd been sharing on Instagram. "Your recent work captures something universal about family disillusionment," the owner explained. "Would you consider a small exhibit in January?" The prospect terrified and exhilarated me equally. These paintings represented my rawest emotions, entirely different from my commercial portfolio. After 3 days of deliberation, I accepted. Preparing for the exhibit became healing ritual. Each piece required an artist's statement explaining its emotional context. Writing these forced me to articulate feelings previously expressed only through color and form. The collection title emerged organically, Erasure of Emergence, acknowledging both the attempt to erase me and my emergence from that destruction. Days before Christmas, my phone displayed an unfamiliar number. Against better judgment, I answered. "Mackenzie, it's Mom." My heart raced, fight or flight response immediate. "How did you get this number?" "Amber's mother." "Please don't be upset with her. I've been desperate to reach you." The connection surprised me, but I remained wary. "What do you want, Mom?" "To check if you're okay. To say I'm sorry for not defending you. Your father was wrong, and I was wrong to stay silent." Her voice carried genuine regret, but I'd learned to question even seemingly sincere emotions. "I appreciate that. I'm not ready for more conversation right now." "I understand. Can I text occasionally? Just to know you're alive?" The request seemed reasonable, the bare minimum of maternal concern. "Text only. I'll respond when I can." After ending the call, I sat with conflicted emotions. My mother's contact offered a thin thread of connection, but I remained unsure whether maintaining it represented healing or regression. January brought the exhibit opening. 20 paintings arranged chronologically showed my emotional journey from devastation to tentative rebuilding. Gallery visitors moved through the space in reverent silence, many wiping tears or nodding in recognition. Several approached afterward, sharing their own family estrangement stories. That night, lying awake processing the evening's emotional intensity, I received a text from Mom. "Your brother showed me pictures of your exhibit. Your talent has always been extraordinary. I'm sorry I never said that enough." The message landed in a tender place, acknowledgement I'd sought for decades. Yet I recognized the danger in seeking validation from the same source that had withheld it. True healing required building self-worth independent of parental approval. As winter mellowed into spring, small freelance opportunities emerged from connections made at the exhibit. My leave from Pixel Perfect ended, but rather than returning, I submitted my resignation, choosing to pursue independent projects that aligned with my authentic creative voice. The foundation for a new life was taking shape, one built on chosen connections, creative integrity, and hard-earned emotional awareness. Then an unexpected call from Dylan shattered my carefully constructed peace. "Dad had a heart attack." Dylan's voice trembled slightly through the phone. My body responded before my mind processed the information, pulse racing, hands suddenly cold. How bad? I managed to ask. Serious but not critical. They did an angioplasty. He's stable now. A storm of contradictory emotions followed. Relief he was alive. Anger at myself for feeling relief. Guilt for not immediately saying I'd visit. Fear of re-entering the family dynamic I'd worked so hard to escape. Beneath it all, the persistent question, did I still owe him anything? Mom's a mess, Dylan continued. She keeps asking if you know. I think she needs you there. I promised to think about it and ended the call. Immediately, I contacted Dr. Lindsay for an emergency session. This situation creates a genuine ethical dilemma, she acknowledged as I paced her office later that day. There's no perfect answer. If I go, I risk undoing months of progress, I said. If I don't, I'll feel guilty potentially forever. What boundaries would you need to visit without compromising your emotional safety? This practical question cut through the emotional tangle. Together, we developed a framework. I would visit briefly, maintain physical and conversational distance from my father, bring Amber as support, and leave immediately if boundaries were violated. With this protection plan in place, I boarded a train to Philadelphia the following morning. Amber sat beside me, her presence both comfort and shield. The hospital corridor stretched impossibly long as we approached the cardiac unit, my steps slowing instinctively. Mom spotted me first, rising from her waiting room chair with visible relief. Her arms opened automatically, then hesitated, uncertainty replacing her initial response. I completed the embrace briefly, the familiar scent of her perfume triggering complicated nostalgia. He's awake, she said, gesturing toward a room across the hall. The doctor says he needs to avoid stress. I won't stay long, I promised, introducing Amber as my friend without further elaboration. Dylan emerged from Dad's room, surprise registering at my actual appearance. He'd matured in the months since I'd seen him, subtle lines around his eyes suggesting stress beyond his years. Our hug felt awkward, siblings made strangers by family dysfunction. He's been asking for you, Dylan said quietly. In his way. I understood this qualification. Dad would never directly request my presence, but had likely mentioned me in passive-aggressive asides. Entering the hospital room required physical effort, each step fighting against deep self-protective instincts. Dad looked diminished against white sheets, medical equipment beeping softly around him. His skin held a grayish undertone, the invincible father figure replaced by mortal fragility. His eyes found mine, widening slightly in evident surprise. You came. Yes, I answered simply, maintaining distance near the doorway. An uncomfortable silence expanded between us. Finally, he spoke again, words slurring slightly from medication. I'm sorry about that stupid post. Shouldn't have done it. The apology, incomplete, but unprecedented, caught me off guard. Before I could formulate a response, he continued. Always been too hard on you. Didn't understand your art thing. Still don't, really. But shouldn't have said all that. His vulnerability, likely enhanced by medication and mortality's shadow, felt both genuine and insufficient. Years of damage couldn't be erased by one semi-coherent hospital bed apology. Thank you for saying that, I replied carefully. I hope you recover quickly. Further conversation proved impossible as a nurse entered to check vitals, creating a natural endpoint to our brief interaction. In the hallway, Mom gripped my arm. Will you come to the house tonight? Just to talk. Every instinct screamed to return to Boston immediately, but the desperation in her eyes gave me pause. I can come for a short visit. Amber will be with me. That evening, the family home felt simultaneously familiar and foreign. Photos still chronicled Dylan's achievements disproportionately. The kitchen still smelled of Mom's signature lasagna. Yet subtle changes marked the passing months: new furniture, different paint in the hallway, evidence of life continuing in my absence. Mom served coffee in strained silence while Dylan fidgeted with his phone. Finally, Amber broke the tension with direct practicality. Mackenzie came because it was the right thing to do, but that doesn't mean the past disappears. What happens now depends on all of you. Mom set down her cup with unusual decisiveness. I want to try family therapy. All of us, once your father recovers enough. Dylan nodded immediate agreement. I should have stood up for you years ago, Kenz. I'm sorry. His apology, unlike Dad's, carried specific acknowledgement of his role in the family dynamic. This recognition touched me unexpectedly. I can't promise anything, I said carefully. But I'd consider one session, to see if it's helpful. 3 weeks later, Dad recovered enough for our first appointment with Dr. Calloway, a family therapist with expertise in estrangement. The session began awkwardly, Dad clearly uncomfortable in the therapeutic setting. Why are we paying someone to discuss private family matters, he grumbled. Because our private handling of family matters resulted in public humiliation and estrangement, Mom answered with unprecedented directness. Dr. Calloway established ground rules for communication, then asked each family member to describe their perception of family dynamics without interruption. Mom spoke of fear of conflict that led to enabling harmful behaviors. Dylan acknowledged his complicity in maintaining the golden child role at my expense. When my turn came, I described the lifetime of conditional approval, the consistent undermining of my choices, and finally, the devastating impact of the social media poll. Throughout my account, Dad's expression shifted from defensive to uncomfortable. When Dr. Calloway invited his response, he stood abruptly. This is ridiculous. I provided for this family for 30 years, and this is my thanks. Being villainized for having standards and expectations. He stormed out, slamming the door behind him. Dr. Calloway remained calm. This reaction is common in first sessions, particularly from family members unaccustomed to having their perspective challenged. The session continued productively without him, focusing on how remaining family members could build healthier communication patterns regardless of Dad's participation. A week later, Dad surprisingly agreed to a second session, though his participation remained defensive and minimal. The third session marked a turning point, when Dr. Calloway directly addressed the control patterns evident in his parenting. Mr. Wilson, your daughter's career choice wasn't a rejection of you personally. It was her authentic expression of self. Dad scoffed. It was deliberate defiance. Is that how you viewed your own career choices, as statements about your parents? The question visibly startled him. After a long pause, he spoke more quietly than I'd ever heard. My father wanted me to take over his plumbing business. I wanted something more. He never forgave me for going to college instead. This revelation stunned me. Dad had never mentioned his father's disapproval, or any parallel to our situation. Dr. Calloway gently highlighted the pattern. Dad had repeated with me precisely what had wounded him with his own father. I'm nothing like him, Dad protested, but with less conviction. You both struggled to separate your children's choices from your own identity, Dr. Calloway observed. The specific expectations differed, but the conditional acceptance created the same damage. Dad fell silent, genuinely contemplative for perhaps the first time in our sessions. In subsequent weeks, these therapy discussions catalyzed gradual change. Dad's lifelong patterns wouldn't transform overnight, but small shifts accumulated, questions about my current projects that contained actual interest, decreased comparison with Dylan, occasional recognition of his own controlling tendencies. Dr. Calloway suggested a formal relationship agreement outlining mutual expectations and boundaries. Dad initially dismissed this as corporate nonsense for family matters, but ultimately participated in its creation. The document specified communication patterns, acknowledged trigger topics, and established protocols for addressing inevitable conflicts. While these structured interactions felt artificial compared to idealized family relationships, they provided essential scaffolding for rebuilding fractured trust. I maintained physical distance in Boston, limiting visits to monthly therapy weekends while continuing individual healing work. The relationship remained fragile, progress non-linear, old patterns occasionally resurfacing. But within this imperfect reconciliation process emerged something unexpected, an authentic relationship replacing the performative one we'd maintained for years. For perhaps the first time, we began seeing each other as complex individuals rather than disappointing reflections of unfulfilled expectations. 1 year after discovering that devastating social media poll, I stood in a downtown Boston gallery surrounded by my newest collection, mixed media pieces exploring family mythology and chosen connection. The exhibition represented not just artistic evolution, but personal transformation. Across the room, Amber directed caterers with characteristic efficiency, while our friend circle managed final display adjustments. My freelance business had flourished beyond expectation, allowing me to be selective about clients and projects. The creative voice I'd reclaimed during Healing Now informed commercial work as well, attracting clients who specifically sought my perspective rather than generic design solutions. The gallery door opened to reveal unexpected visitors, my parents and Dylan, arriving precisely at the invitation time. Mom immediately embraced me with genuine warmth. Dad followed more hesitantly, surveying the space with visible discomfort yet making the effort to appear. "Quite a turnout," he observed, gesturing to the growing crowd. "Your work obviously resonates with people." This acknowledgement, though modest, represented significant progress from dismissing my art as mere hobby. Our relationship remained careful, measured interactions replacing both open hostility and false closeness. Monthly family therapy continued, supplemented by individual sessions that helped each of us recognize and interrupt unhealthy patterns. Dylan had emerged as an unexpected ally during this reconstruction period. After acknowledging his role in the family dynamic, he'd actively worked to build an authentic sibling relationship independent of our parents. His engagement to Melissa had evolved from corporate milestone to genuine partnership, her outsider perspective often helping him recognize lingering family dysfunction. Dad wandered toward a particular piece, a multimedia canvas incorporating fragments of my childhood drawings overlaid with adult technical skill, titled Integration. He studied it longer than the others, expression unreadable. "This reminds me of a drawing you did when you were about 8, he said finally. "A family portrait, where you gave everyone wildly colored hair." The memory surprised me. "You remember that?" "I kept it in my desk drawer at work for years." He shrugged awkwardly. "You had talent even then." I was just too focused on security to see its value. Before I could respond, a gallery patron approached requesting details about my process. By the time the conversation ended, Dad had moved to examine other pieces, the moment of connection brief but significant. Later, as the exhibition wound down, he declined my suggestion of restaurant recommendations. "I've already imposed enough on your evening. This is your moment, you don't need your old man hovering around criticizing the wine selection." This self-awareness, recognizing how his presence affected me and adjusting accordingly, demonstrated more growth than lengthy apologies could have. We'd never have the effortless father-daughter relationship portrayed in movies, but the authentic version we were building contained something more valuable: mutual respect for separate identities. The following morning, Dad called with unsolicited business advice about tax strategies for independent contractors. My initial reaction was defensive irritation until I recognized the gesture beneath the content. He was attempting connection through knowledge sharing, albeit awkwardly. Instead of rejecting the overture outright, I thanked him for the thought while gently establishing I had accountant support already. "Of course you do," he replied. "You've built something impressive entirely on your own terms." This acknowledgement, that my path had validity despite diverging from his blueprint, represented our most significant breakthrough. My healing journey continues daily. Therapy has taught me that forgiveness doesn't require forgetting. I can acknowledge my father's growth while maintaining protective boundaries. I can value family connections without sacrificing authentic self-expression. Most importantly, I've learned that sometimes nearly losing something teaches us whether we truly wanted it or merely felt obligated to preserve it. The family mythology I inherited portrayed blood connections as paramount, success as narrowly defined, and parental approval as life's ultimate validation. Dismantling these beliefs proved both painful and liberating. In their place, I've constructed a more nuanced understanding. Family includes both given and chosen connections. Success encompasses both external achievements and internal authenticity. Validation comes primarily from within, supplemented by those who genuinely see and appreciate our true selves. If you've experienced family betrayal like I have, please know that healing is possible though rarely linear. Your worth was never determined by those who failed to recognize it. Building boundaries isn't selfish, it's essential self-preservation. And sometimes, the most loving choice is stepping back to allow space for mutual growth. I'd love to hear your own experiences with family reconciliation or estrangement in the comments below. Have you maintained boundaries while rebuilding relationships, or found greater peace in distance? Please like and subscribe if this journey resonated with you, and share with someone who might need permission to prioritize their own well-being even when family expectations demand otherwise. Thank you for witnessing my story of erasure and emergence, both the heartbreak and the healing that followed.